Hello, everybody. Oh, wow, we got a big group today, actually.
It's nice to have a lot of friends and relatives.
Cool.
I'm just trying to see how many people I actually recognize. I know a few people. All right, I guess I'll get going. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stuart McCunn, and I'm just going to be giving a talk today about Dracula, who most people will recognize as the vampire. But today what I'm going to look at is the real Dracula, the real guy. He was a historic figure. So if you have had any familiarity at all with Dracula, you're going to be familiar with that. You know, Bela Lugosi, the most famous Dracula, Hungarian actor. Possibly Christopher Lee as various Hammer film versions of Dracula. You get the last guy to do it was Nick Cage, who did it in Renfield just earlier this year. And my personal favorite is Gary Oldman in Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992. And this is the one that I'm going to focus on right now, because this is, in this movie, there is actually a direct connection made between Dracula and the historical figure of Dracula. The introduction, the prologue to the film has Dracula going around impaling people, which is what he is known for, and it gives him this medieval garb in an absolutely absurd suit of rib armor that I have no idea where they got that from. But I don't know, he's designed to look like the devil, I think. But in any event, this is identifying him explicitly, not just with Dracula from Bram Stoker's version of it, but with the historical figure as well. And you can see this connection is made also through Christopher Lee. This is Christopher Lee doing a different version of Dracula in a documentary called In Search of Dracula from 1975. And he's much closer to how the actual guy looked. He's at least trying to imitate the sort of mustache, the protruding lower lip. He's got very high cheekbones, does Christopher Lee, so that is a good start for the Dracula look. And this is the real guy. This is Vlad Dracula, the real guy. His portrait, as found in the Schloss Ambros in what is now Austria. And this connection between the historical figure of Dracula and the vampiric version in Bram Stoker is not something that these guys just made up. You can find the reference to it in Stoker's work itself. So this was a quote from Dracula. Who was it but one of my own race who as voivode crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground? This was a Dracula indeed. Woe is it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery upon them. Was it not this Dracula indeed who inspired that other of his race, who in later age again and again brought his forces over the great river into Turkey land, who when he was beaten back came again and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph. So this is the Bram Stoker's idea of Dracula's history. It directly relates to his career, as we will see. Although he does get some things wrong, and he seems to think that Dracula is two separate people, he is genuinely trying to connect his vampire with a real prince back in the 15th century AD. So he doesn't borrow the, it's not really clear what his sources are, but he's not alone in connecting Dracula with all sorts of brutality. We find this in some of the earliest records of him. These are a series of woodcuts, that is, these are pieces of wood carved out so that they can be printed on sheets of paper. and used in newspapers, newsletters, and pamphlets as an early form of illustration. And these are two examples of the Dracula legend as it is depicted in the source tradition. So it's not clear where exactly Stoker heard the name Dracula from, but wherever he heard it from almost certainly had this aspect of Dracula's life in mind: the tyrant, the murderer, the villain, the fiend, who shows up in these woodcuts and is going to be an important figure in the early history of the printing press. So the interesting thing about this is that this is the version of Dracula that has come down through history, but there is yet another version of Dracula out there. If you go to Romania today, you are going to find Vlad's statue all over the place, because he is a national hero of Romania. He is one of the founding fathers of the country. He's roughly the equivalent of George Washington. And he even gets his own movie where he's portrayed very heroically and you know, well, he's a Romanian nationalist hero, defending the Romanians against all these foreign invaders and Turks and so on. So this is a different vision of Dracula than most people are likely to have in mind when they hear the name Dracula. And to tell the story of Dracula, we have to learn a little bit more about his background, about the time and place where he lived. And we need to look to what is now today Romania and the various states that existed within it. So what is now Romania, at the time, in the early 15th century, consisted of three different states, which were Moldavia, which is an independent country, Transylvania, which is going to be under the control of Hungary, and then Wallachia, which is under the control of, well, ultimately Vlad, Dracula, and his descendants. So contrary to, you know, to Bram Stoker, Dracula isn't associated with Transylvania. He is associated with Wallachia, where he ruled over it as voivoda, or prince. So Dracula actually had to take a demotion in order to become a vampire. He wasn't a count, he was closer in rank. Voivoda translates much more like duke than it does as count. Voivoda was an important position. They're basically an independent hereditary prince. So we have to look to Wallachia to understand Dracula's background. And Wallachia, the history of Wallachia starts off in the early 14th century when it first managed to achieve independence from the Kingdom of Hungary. So in Romania, the first king, first voivoda, was a guy called Basarab the Great, who founded the Principality of Wallachia, made himself functionally independent of the Hungarian kings, and set himself up as an independent ruler in the state for the first time, where he ruled out of his capital at Curtea de Argeș. His eventual successor was his son Mircea the Elder. Mircea the Elder was the greatest king that Wallachia ever knew. Mircea the Elder expanded the bounds of his country. He was able to make Wallachia into one of the most important states in the region, and he was able to maintain his independence and security away from the control of all of the other peoples. So Mircea and Basarab, both of them ruled from their capital of Curtea de Argeș, which is still in Romania today. It's just it's still a city, but it's quite a small one on the scheme of things. This is their main church, and this is the remains of the princely court where they once ruled. This is looking the other direction. These are, by the way, these are all my own photos. There's like 3, I think, that are from somewhere else, but I took all these photos last summer when I was in Romania. And from Curtia to Argesh, they were able to rule over Wallachia and set themselves up as independent rulers of their own country. So that is the background to Dracula's family. These guys are his ancestors, but his story actually starts in Transylvania. He does have some Transylvanian ties, in a place called Sighisoara, which is just north of the Carpathian Mountains. And this building here was the official mint of Sighisoara. This was where the coins were produced. These guys had a royal monopoly from the King of Hungary to produce their own coins. And it is thought that this is where Vlad Dracul was going to set up shop. So this is one of the rooms inside the building. Today it's a restaurant. And if you look over here at the side there, you will see a painting in which is depicted Vlad's Dracul, Dracula's father, this guy here with the big fancy mustache. I'm not 100% convinced myself that this is the guy, but they do associate it with him. The building itself was badly burned in the 17th century, so the theory is that they repainted it with painting over all of this, and that is how it was preserved. So Vlad was the son of Mercia the Great, and Vlad is going to have been sent at a young age to one of the royal courts in Germany, because one of the distinctive features of the Slavic states of Eastern Europe is that they do not distinguish rights of succession based on primogeniture or any form of firstborn inherits everything. Anybody who is the son of the previous prince has the right to set themselves up as prince as well. Whether they're legitimate, whether they're born of the main wife, it doesn't matter. Anybody who is the son of the previous prince has the right to become prince, meaning that whenever a prince dies, there's going to be a lot of conflict as they try to sort out who replaces him. Vlad was sent off to the court in Germany, in Nuremberg, where he ended up, and while he was there as a child, he was inducted into the Order of the Dragon, which is where he gets his name from. Dracul in Romanian means the dragon, and he was proud enough of his symbol, of his membership of this knightly order, that he wore the symbol of the dragon everywhere he went, and it became part of his name. While he was living in this house, it's thought, this is where he had his son, Vlad, and in Romanian, the "a" prefix on the end of the name indicates son of. It indicates that it's genitive. It's the son of Dracul. So Dracula literally means son of the dragon, and this is where Dracula was born, in this house here, which is commemorated in a tasteful sort of painting. You're going to find a lot of this sort of thing in Romania, where there's anything to do with Vlad Dracula. So Sighisoara itself is an interesting place. As I said, it's not part of Wallachia, so it's not part of the territory ruled by Dracula or his family. It is instead part of what are called the Saxon cities, which are going to be independent city-states that are under the control of the kings of Hungary. So here's a different example. This is a place called Biertan, and Biertan is a very good example of how one of these cities looks. So what it is it's a fortified church. This is a church. It's surrounded by an inner fortification there to keep all the unwanted people out. There's an outer fortification, and then there's a small town that's located outside of it. And these Saxons come from Germany. They were invited in by the King of Hungary to settle on these regions once he took control of them, to bring their commerce and their trade and their wealth with them, so that he would be able to settle people who were loyal to him on this land to secure his control and authority over it. As you can tell, it's heavily fortified and defended. because these places were always in danger of being attacked by various rivals, by various other powers. And you see the same thing in all of the Saxon cities as well. So this is still Biertan, but these are the walls of Sigisoara. As you can tell, it is very well defended. They call this the Brass Tower. The walls stretch all the way around the city, and they're going to defend it from anybody taking control of the place through military force. If you take a broader overview of Sigisoara, this is the old town itself. It's built in the same basic way as Biertan. You've got the fortified church on the top of the hill, and then as you go down, you get the main city proper, protected by its city walls, and this is designed to keep the city safe from invasion or conquest or intruders. So wherever you go within the city, you've got the church looking down on you, and this is going to be important just for their protection and security, because there's really not that many people living in this. Transylvania, Wallachia, all of these places have a very, very low population density. They're mostly villages. The cities like this have maybe 2,000 to 5,000 people living in them, and that makes them the big population centers of the region. So Sigisoara is a pretty cool place. You can see how it's basically laid out. It's not all that big, but it's very well defended. It's got the fortified church on top if they need a further place to hide. And this is where Dracula is going to live out his earliest first few years. Now, over the course of time, Dracula's brother becomes king when his father dies, when his father Mercia dies. This is how Dracula ends up inside Sigisoara, because the king of Hungary decides that he would rather support Dracula to lead Wallachia. He'd be more reliable guy on the throne. So Dracula sits in Sigisoara and waits until eventually he is able to seize control of Wallachia from his brother, take control of the whole place, and put himself in charge of the whole thing. So here is Wallachia again, and Wallachia is, so let's just be clear here where we are. This is Sigisoara. This is the old capital of Arges, and Targoviste is going to be the capital city under Vlad Dracula and his successors. This is the princely court in Targoviste. This is where Vlad lived, this is where his family lived, and this is where he is going to rule over while he is going to be serving as voivoda of the region. Now the thing about Wallachia's position, and the thing that makes this whole thing so very tenuous, is that it is located right in the middle of a perpetual war zone. To the north, the northwest, you've got Hungary, which controls Transylvania, or the part of Transylvania and all this bit. To the south, you've got the expanding Ottoman Empire, and the only sort of Christian state left over in this part of the world is going to be the remnants of Byzantium, which is rapidly collapsing as the Ottoman Turks take over the place. So the voivodes of Wallachia are in the unenviable position of owing their obedience to both the kings of Hungary and the sultans of the Ottoman Empire, meaning they are obliged to support both of them when and if they are called to, and yet both of them are perpetually at war with each other, always trying to kill each other and compete, meaning that it is a very delicate, dangerous balancing act that the princes are going to have to carry out if they want to stay alive. If they support one power against the other power is certainly going to take its revenge by using one of the many, many members of the royal family to take over the throne and put their own guy on the throne. And as a result, by the middle years of the 15th century, Wallachia is a very, very unstable place, something that's a good idea to keep in mind when we look at Dracula and his upbringing. So, Dracul is going to have to answer to the Hungarians. He's going to support the Hungarians when he has no choice, but he's also going to have to support the Ottoman Sultan when the Sultan calls on him. And the Sultan is going to require him to come to their city, their capital of Adrianople, to pay homage to him and to renew his vows of fidelity every time that the Sultan calls on him. So when the Sultan calls him down, Vlad Dracul comes there with his family, and for whatever reason, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, a guy called Murad, is going to be deeply suspicious about Vlad's loyalties. He is going to have him locked up, take him and his sons prisoner, and keep them captive while he tries to decide what to do with them. So there's going to be two big names in the Ottoman Empire to remember. Murad, who is going to be playing a main role in Vlad's early life, and Mehmed, who is going to be his overlord when he actually becomes king. So these two guys are going to be the father-son team who rule over the Ottoman Empire, and eventually Murad is going to decide that Vlad Dracul can be trusted, and he is going to let him back to his principality, but he's going to keep his two sons as hostage. So Vlad the Dracula, his second-born son, and his youngest son, Radu, are both going to remain hostages at the Ottoman court in order to ensure their father's loyalty. So Vlad Dracula is going to grow up in the court among all these Ottomans, among the Sultan and his men, and he is going to be Mehmet's close peer in terms of age. He's going to learn how to speak Turkish, he's going to learn Turkish culture, how the Ottomans operate, and he is going to grow up almost as Turkish as he grows up Wallachian and all of his other ancestry. Now, once Dracul has abandoned his family to the Turks, he is then going to have to answer to the Hungarians, who also have a claim on his loyalties. And once again, it is going to be a team of two people, a father and son, who are going to shape Vlad's career. János Hunyadi, who is here on the left, and his son, Matthias Corvinus. So these guys, this is from the Monument to the Heroes in Budapest. These guys are both going to be strong supporters of the Hungarian state. János Hunyadi is the voivode of Transylvania on behalf of the kings of Hungary. His son is going to be king of Hungary in his own right, but we'll get to them when we get to them. So for the moment, János Hunyadi is just the voivode of Transylvania. This is his castle, called Corvin's Castle, up in a place called Hunedoara, in what is now modern Romania. Hunedoara and Hunyadi are the same word. So Hunyadi has about 1 million different names depending on which language you use. We call him John Hunyadi generally. The Hungarians call him János Hunyadi. In Romanian, he is going to be Ioan de Hunedoara. Either way, he is the guy who is ruling over Transylvania on behalf of the kings of Hungary. His castle's a very cool place. If you ever happen to stop by in Romania, it's well worth the visit. It is an enormous palace, an enormous castle, much bigger than the castle in Wallachia. And from here, Hunyadi is going to dictate terms and try to establish his policy on how to beat back the Ottoman Empire and expand the strength of the kings of Hungary. So as voivoda, Hunyadi has a authority. He has the ability to fund these princes, these rivals to the throne of Wallachia. But Hunyadi's biggest goal in life is going to be crusade. Hunyadi is a big crusader, and by the 15th century, the crusading movement is really on its last legs. There hasn't been a successful crusade in centuries. Hunyadi is determined to turn this around. He is going to form a massive army for what is going to be called the Crusade of Varna, to crush the Ottoman Empire, to defeat them at the port of Varna in what is now Bulgaria. He is going to do his best to try to bring an end to the Ottoman Empire and expand the strength and position of Hungary. So he convinces the King of Hungary to wage this crusade. He convinces all these crusaders to come in and take on the Ottomans, but he is not able to convince Vlad Dracul. Vlad Dracul is going to remain neutral because he thinks the crusade is a fool's errand, which turns out to be correct. The crusade is a massive disaster. Hunyadi loses completely. The entire army is massacred. The King of Hungary is killed. And when Hunyadi returns back through Wallachia to his voivodate in Transylvania, Dracul is going to take him prisoner and very carefully consider having him executed. So this is a disaster for Hunyadi, but Hunyadi has an incredible ability to fail upwards. So his failure here, the death of the Hungarian king, means that there is now a child on the throne of Hungary. Hunyadi is the most powerful ruler in the Hungarian Empire. He becomes the regent for this young king and becomes the most powerful person in the state of the Kingdom of Hungary. And Hunyadi, amongst other things, is never going to forget or forgive a slight. So in 1447, 3 years after the disaster at Varna, he is going to lead a surprise raid into Wallachia, kill Vlad Dracul, kill his eldest son Mercia, and appoint another member of the Draculas, the Mercia's family, to the throne of Wallachia, somebody who he can trust to help him the next time that he goes on crusade. This is the point at which Dracula first comes of age. He is in his late teens by this point. And as Hunyadi readies himself to start yet another crusade, he is going to, Dracula is going to go and be appointed by the Ottoman Sultan to go and retake Wallachia for his family, because he is seen as more likely to support the Ottomans than Hunyadi's candidate. Dracula seizes control of Targovista, sets himself up as prince, and he rules there for about a month before he is driven out by Hunyadi's returning army. He's driven into exile and spends the better part of the next decade hiding out and trying to rebuild an army to retake his country. So he's going to settle down eventually in Brasov. That's one of the only places we know he was, because Hunyadi issues an order to the people of Brasov, ordering them to kick Dracula out. And this is another one of the Saxon cities up in Transylvania. The main advantage of the main point of the Saxon cities from the perspective of Wallachia is that they're very close to the Wallachian border. And this means that anybody who wants to set themselves up as prince of Wallachia is going to find that the best place to be is Brasov, Sighisowara, Sibiu, one of the Saxon cities, where they can build up an army, recruit people to join their side, and then very quickly and easily enter into Wallachia and seize control. Dracula is going to do his best to do this, and eventually, he is going to win the support of Janos Hunyadi. So Hunyadi's candidate for the throne of Wallachia turns out to have exactly the same problems as every other prince of Wallachia. He needs to balance obedience to the King of Hungary to obedience to the Sultan of the Ottomans. And Hunyadi is of the opinion he is much too chummy with the Ottomans, whereas this new guy, Vlad Dracula, he says he'll be loyal to Hunyadi. He might as well give him a shot. So with Hunyadi's support, the people of Brasov are going to give Vlad the army that he wants. Vlad is going to march into Targovista, seize control of the whole area, kill off his uncle, and take control of the throne. And at the princely court in Curtier de Argeș, the old traditional capital of Wallachia, in this church here, he is going to be crowned and acclaimed by all of the members of the nobility of Wallachia as their new voivode, as their new prince, as the ruler of the independent state of Wallachia. So this is very much the way that it would have looked at the time. All of these these frescoes date to the 14th century. So it would have looked very much like this when Dracula was acclaimed prince by all of the boyars of his country. So the boyars do require a little bit of explanation. The boyars are the noble classes of much of Eastern Europe. You find boyar class in Russia, you find them in all of the Slavic states. And these guys are a hereditary nobility. They rule over the lands by right of birth, by right of appointment by God. They're traditional nobles, traditional leaders of the country, leaders of society. They're all going to be very important people. And a prince cannot rule over the state without the support of at least some of the boyar families. And this is when we start to enter into Vlad's career and some of the notorious acts that he was responsible for when he took control over the state of Wallachia. So in the court at Targovishta, Dracula invited all of his leading boyars. This is the story. He invited something like 200 boyars to come in and visit him and dine with him, share in his talk and discuss the future and the next goal, the next actions that the state of Wallachia was going to take, what sort of policies to enact, how to go about ruling the country, what they should do, any sort of policy decisions that they might have in mind. When he took control, when he invited them in and brought them in, he then seized all of them, all 200 of them, and immediately set about impaling them and sticking them on spikes. So this is the dining room, the dining hall of the court at Targovishta. And as you can see already, we are definitely dealing with exaggeration. There is not room for 200 people in here. Even under the most optimistic of circumstances, we're talking 20 or 30 people. And the dungeons under Targovishta, which is this, by the way, this is the only place in all of Romania which doesn't advertise its Dracula vampire connections, and it's the only place in Romania that has a very strong Dracula connection, ironically enough. It doesn't have room to house these people. What we know about the story of this is just that, a story. It comes from these accounts of Dracula's enemies, in this case, singers, poets at the court in Hungary, at Budapest, later Romanian legends, Russian accounts, and the main account that I think sort of sets the scene here is this one from the court poet, the court singer of Michael Beheim, who writes a poem about Dracula's despotism in the year 1463, so shortly after Dracula leaves the throne. And what he says is that the depraved villain, Dracula, invited all the boyars and noblemen in his land to his abode in Targovishte. When the banquet was at an end, he began to ask his guests, asking the eldest man how many princes he had known and how many lords this same land had had to control it. So this man asserted, as best that he could, he began to talk, as did the others. Old and young, each separately, Dracula asked the same question of those gathered there. How many such lords could they recall of those who became rulers? This they answered, one after the other, as many as each could think of. One believed that there had been 30 different rulers, another 20, and no one was so young that they could only recall 7. When this question was fully answered, as I have now sung it to you, it rhymes better in German, I assume, Dracula said, "Tell me, how is it that you have had so many rulers and princes in your land? The cause for this disgrace must be your shameful defiance." Then he took them out and had them all impaled in front of his capital in Targovishte. This is the story that comes with this. And it is something that is very nasty and associated with Dracula. His other name, the name by which he is often known by in Romania to this day, is Vlad Țepeș, which means Vlad the Impaler, because this was his favorite form of execution. You hold people onto the ground, you put them down, you stick a stake up their rectum, tie their legs to a rope, and then you either have people pull them down until the spike goes all the way through them, or you have horses pull them. Then you elevate them up and put them on display for everybody to see their death agonies. Depending on how sharp the spike is, and Dracula supposedly liked it very blunt, you can survive for many hours like this. It's not a very nice way to go. It's very painful. It's not unique to Dracula by any means. The Turks used to do it, the Hungarians did it sometimes, but it is something that Dracula is, he has a real fondness for. It's not at all clear why, but he has a very real obsession with impaling people for the first offense, basically. Everybody who dies is going to be impaled or face some other gruesome form of execution. Very inventive when it comes to executions. So the families of those who he has killed are then going to be taken prisoner, taken captive along with them, while their fathers and brothers and sons are going to be impaled on spikes outside the capital of Targoviste. The rest of them are going to be marched up through the old capital of Argeș into the region of the Făgăraș. So Făgăraș is in is in the Carpathian Mountains, in the central areas of what is now Romania. And if you go there today, you will see it's one of the most isolated and difficult bits of terrain that you're likely to encounter. Carpathian Mountains are very big. They bisect Romania in two pretty effectively. And they are going to be a real barrier between Transylvania and Wallachia. Although Făgăraș is part of Wallachian territory, they can get over to the other side of it. So this is the Făgăraș today, and this little road here is called the Transfăgărașan. Try saying that 5 times fast. It took me my entire trip to learn to pronounce it correctly, to get practice. This is a road that is built that goes right over the Carpathian Mountains. It was built in the 19th century, in the 1970s, 1974, by the dictator of Romania, a guy called Ceausescu, in order to enable him to move his army from the southern part of Romania to the northern part of Romania in case the Soviets invaded. So he was a communist, he was a communist dictator, but if anyone is familiar, I don't know if people remember, if people are old enough to remember the 1968, when the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, when Czechoslovakia started to go its own way, Ceausescu was very concerned that they might do the same to Romania, so he had this road built at enormous cost in life and money, and many hundreds of convicts and people died over the course of building this road. They were worked to death in order to build it. It is still a very cool road if you ever get the chance. It's only open for 3 months in the summer because the rest of the time it's snowed under. So when I was there in early June, the road was still closed because there was still snow in the mountains. You can see all the snow up there. But if I had been able to go up, I would have been able to go up and seen this lake called Balia Lake, which is in the northern heights of the Făgăraș Mountains. And what's interesting about this lake is that it directly connects to legends and myths and supernatural stories. The legend is that deep in the Carpathian Mountains there is a lake where the people, the Schlomance, this is a German legend, and beneath this lake lies a school where people can go who want to be wizards, to go and learn from Satan himself, who will teach them the tricks of magic, who will give them control and power over the world in exchange for their souls. And one of them, the highest member of the class, after 7 years of study, is going to be given control of the dragon that controls the weather, controls the seasons, and he's going to be able to rain, storms and winds and so on upon the population whenever he so chooses. And this is in the northern bit of Wallachia, right near where Dracula is going to send these guys. So I've taken us quite a way up into the Fagaration, up the Transfiguration. If you go further down the Transfiguration, if you go back the way that we've come, you are going to get to this big dam, which was again built by Caiuscu in order to get hydroelectric power. He built this artificial lake, damming up the Argesh River. And if you go just a little bit south of that, you are going to end up in this valley here. You can see where the road goes over here. And if you look up there, you will see a big castle in this most isolated of regions, in this high, completely impossible to besiege terrain. And this is going to be where Dracula sent all of the people, the families of the boyars and rulers who he had impaled. So I was there with my drone, thankfully, so I get this really cool video that will show us just how high up it is to Dracula's castle, his actual castle at Poinare. So this is big. This is a very high place. My drone, I had to disable the height restrictions on the drone to get it up there. It's something like 400 meters straight up in the air, so a third of a kilometer, something like that. And unfortunately it was closed while I was there for construction. They're still working on it after all these years. But I did get some pretty good views nonetheless from the road below. So I'll shut up now and just let us look at this, because I think this is pretty cool.
How in the world would one get up there?
Yeah.
There are, I don't remember how many steps. I want to say there's about 1,500 step walk up there. The big problem, though, is the bears. There are tons of bears, and at this moment in time, they're not afraid of people, because people have a terrible tendency of feeding them. So while I was driving around, I saw a bunch of bears come up to the car and see if I was going to offer them food. Because unfortunately, people are morons. There's always morons around who are going to do really stupid things. And as a result, they have to electrify fences around the path up. I did see people working on this, though. I was really shocked when I took the drone up from the other side. There was a whole bunch of workmen up there fixing it up. So it was supposed to open up this year. It didn't, but I'm pleased to see that they are at least working on it and planning to open it up in future. It's a very impressive, very difficult to besiege place. And this is where he sent all of those people, the families of all the people who he had murdered. He sent them up this giant cliff face, up this giant rock, carrying these boulders on their shoulders until their clothes ran ragged, until they worked themselves to death, building this big castle so that he was going to be able to have a bolt hole to flee to if he ever got into trouble, given that trouble was pretty much inevitable when you're trapped between the kingdoms of Hungary and of the Ottoman Empire. So this is also going to be a very, touristy place. But don't worry, it's all very tasteful and very tastefully done and very tastefully arranged. Here you go. This is the hotel down the street from where I stayed. Very tasteful and classy sort of an environment. Now, this is going to be part of the point at which we pass beyond recorded history and enter into legend. It is not at all clear which of these stories are true, but I am going to give some sample stories about Dracula's life to give an idea of how he is presented two Romanians, how he is presented to the outside world, the stories of his sort of career as prince. So the first story is the story of the golden cup. The idea was that Dracula had a golden cup left out in front of a well in a prominent place, isolated but prominent, that everybody would go past, and so great was people's fear of him that nobody touched the cup, nobody would dare touch it. They knew that if they tried to steal it or do anything like that, the punishment would be impalement, their death in the most horrible, gruesome way imaginable. This was one of the ideas that he had of what it meant to be just. He was going to bring an end to crime and criminality in his country. Another example of this kind of behavior is when a merchant was visiting his country from one of the German states. The merchant came to Targoviste. They asked Dracula if he would provide guards to protect their caravan for them, as was common practice. Dracula said, no, there's no need for that. Come, visit me, stay in my palace, I'll put you up in rooms for the night, you can leave your caravan undefended. So he did. The caravan was robbed, 160 ducats were stolen, and when the merchant complained to Dracula, Dracula apologized profusely, ordered and said he would immediately identify and apprehend the culprit, and then he secretly went to his bankers, to his treasurers, commanded them to give him 160 gold ducats, and then added a single extra coin to the purse, then took it back, said he had collected it from the thief, handed it back to the merchant. The merchant looked through his coins, counted out his coins, said, oh, no, sir, there has been a mistake. There is an extra ducat here. Dracula then brought out the thief who he had captured and said, well, I'm glad you said that, because if you had not reported it and you had stolen that coin, you would have been joining this thief on the spike right next to him. Wow. All sorts of stories like this, his idea of rough, brutal justice. What was another one? Peasant came up to, Dracula went around in disguise around the country. He came across a peasant whose shirt was too short to cover his belly. So Dracula ordered him and his family to come into court, demanded to know why his wife had not knitted him longer clothing, said it must be due to laziness, and when the peasant said, no, I'm happy with my wife, Dracula said, too bad, had the wife impaled, gave the man a new wife, but first he showed the wife the remains of the old wife and said, make sure that this man is properly clothed. All sorts of stories like this. And this is an idea that is still quite well repeated inside Transylvania. So when I was staying at my hotel, or it's more a bed and breakfast really, right beneath Poinare, right near Poinare, the castle up in the hills, the guy that I was with, the guy who ran the hotel, was talking to me. He brought it up. I didn't mention Dracula, about how they need to have somebody like Dracula back again. They need to have someone back because at least there was law and order, and people were getting what they deserved. And I was just thinking the whole time, you know what? You're saying that because you assume that you're one of the people who are going to not end up on his hit list. Because the story that sticks out to me the most about Dracula is a story that's told of two priests. And these two priests are brought before him in Targoviste. They're Catholics, so there's a bit of a conflict there already. And these two priests are, brought to Dracula. Dracula brings them up into his tower, and he has them look out over the lands of Targoviste at all the impaled people. He brings them up one at a time. They look out at this field of impaled bodies, and he asks them what they think of this. One of the priests answered that this was a travesty, this was a crime, this was the most cruel and inhuman thing that only a beast would do, and that Dracula was going to go to hell for such horrible crimes. The other one said to him that, you know what, you are the prince, you are appointed by God, whatever these people have done, it must have been something really horrible for you to have felt the need to do this to them. So There are two versions of this story. One of them is recorded by the Germans, and the other is recorded by the Russians. The end result in both cases is that one of these priests is going to end up on a spike. But the thing about the two stories is that it's a different priest in each one. In one, Dracula impales the guy who tells him the truth and denounces him for his cruelty, says, oh, well, you're so interested in martyrs, I'll make you one. And the other one tells that he rewards the guy who told the honest truth and punishes the other guy for his dishonesty. So there's no way of knowing which side is the right side. I feel like that's the part of the story that gets left out when the Romanians talk about it. But this is going to be sort of part of the issue when we look at Dracula, because so much of what we know about him is written by outside forces who are repeating all of these legends, and many of the people reporting this are his enemies. So we do know some things about his reign. Among other things, we know that he was the first person to fortify Bucharest, the current capital of Romania. So here's another statue of him. Unfortunately, this was another building that was closed while I was there. They've been working on this for the last decade. That's Romanian construction work for you, unfortunately. But this is the court there. He built that. He had that constructed. So Dracula founded the capital of modern Romania. And we know that happened. Now, while Dracula is ruling over Wallachia as, bloody tyrant, that's what one does, János Hunyadi is going through his own deal, trying to do yet another crusade. This time he is going to lead a crusade into Belgrade to try to free it and keep it free from all of the Turks. So this is a time, a miracle of miracles. Hunyadi actually succeeds. He manages to save Belgrade, take control of it for the King of Hungary, and then he dies of plague. So Hunyadi is dead, and with the death of Hunyadi, the kingdom passes into the hands of the king. The king is old enough to rule. His name is Ladislas the Posthumous, because he was born after his father's death. He takes control of the country, and it turns out that he kind of resented Hunyadi ruling the country as his regent. So he is going to make it his mission in life to destroy Hunyadi's family. He orders Hunyadi's eldest son to come to him to meet him, and then he has him executed for treason, which turns out to be a mistake. Hunyadi's next oldest son, Matthias Corvinus, is going to rise up against him, and he is going to establish himself not as the next voivode of Transylvania. He is going to become the king of all of Hungary. So János Hunyadi's son becomes the ruler of Hungary, and he is going to establish himself in this country and set himself up. Now this is bad news for Vlad, because where János Hunyadi was a supporter of his, even though he was responsible for directly murdering his father, Matthias doesn't particularly trust this Dracula fella, and he is going to allow the Saxon cities to start propping up their own rival candidates to the throne. So this is the Saxon city of Sibiu, up in sort of the southwestern part of Transylvania. And they are going to prop up a guy called Vlad the Monk, who is Dracula's half-brother. So Sibiu is a beautiful, beautiful Saxon city. It's an old, these are all old German towns. So this was originally called Hermannstadt. And one of the distinctive things about Sibiu is it's got a very good example of the religious tensions that exist within Romania. So Wallachia and Transylvania generally are firmly in the Orthodox Christian camp, whereas Hungary is devoutly Catholic. So if you go to Sibiu, you will see they've got this beautiful Orthodox cathedral here, and they have this, what is currently an evangelical Lutheran church, but this is going to be the old Catholic church, the old Catholic cathedral in the city of Sibiu. There are other churches in Sibiu, including this one here, which is called the Chapel of the Holy Cross, which is actually going to be where Dracula's son Minia the Bad, which is a great nickname. Minia the Bad is going to be buried here. He was assassinated on the doorstep of the church by boyars who he had offended. Apparently he had the habit of following after his old man and impaling people, and he chose to impale some of the wrong people. Point is that Sibiu is propping up Vlad's half-brother, illegitimate half-brother, a guy called Vlad the Monk, to be his replacement as the next prince of Wallachia. And this is not the sort of thing that somebody like Vlad is going to tolerate. So Dracula is going to march into the lands controlled by Sibiu. He is going to lay siege to the city. He's going to burn down all of these villages. He's going to attack everyone he finds, and he's going to impale as much of the population as he can catch outside the city walls, until eventually they agree to stop supporting Vlad the Monk. He's going to do much the same thing in the city of Brasov, which is one of those other Saxon cities, another beautiful place with a big, heavily fortified city wall. And here Dracula is going to raid around the outsides of the city and try to ravage as much as he can. So this is Brasov today. This is sort of their main square. And the most distinctive element of Brasov, the most immediately recognizable, is this big sign up here on the hill proclaiming where it is, just in case you forget. And you can travel up the hill by means of a lift. And today it's going to be very easy to get up there. You just take this funicular up. It'll take you up to the top, and you're going to be able to walk behind the sign and look down over the city. So this cable car is pretty cool, and it's from here that Vlad is going to impale as many people as he can possibly catch. He's going to fill this whole wall with men, women, and children that are subject to the people of Sibiu. He's going to sack the villages. He's going to sack a few churches around, impale the people on this wall in order to make clear to the people of Brasov to stop supporting their usurper. This guy is a guy called Dan, to make them behave and stop doing, supporting his rival threat. So at this point, I want to bring back these woodcuts, because these woodcuts are woodcuts are printed in German, if you recognize German Gothic writing. These were printed in Germany for a German-speaking audience, and they were written by people from Brasov, Sibiu, all these Saxon states, who are writing of the brutality and ruthlessness and cruelty of Dracula. And as you might note, they are going to have, Dracula has very real cause to be attacking them. They're going to portray all of this as just motiveless, mindless sort of savagery. They talk of all sorts of things which, again, may or may not be true. They speak of him washing his hands in blood before eating a meal. They speak of him boiling children alive and then forcing their mothers to eat them. Of impaling people who find the stench offensive on high spikes so that they will be above the smell. And they tell all sorts of stories about Vlad's ruthlessness and cruelty to them, and don't mention the fact that they are actively plotting to have him killed, which is the reason for him showing up and doing these horrible things to them. So this doesn't really help Vlad as much as he hopes. Sibiu is going to stop supporting their guy, but they're going to switch their support to Dan. Dan leaves Brasov, goes into to Wallachia, and is almost instantly defeated and killed by Dracula. The story is that Dracula has him dig his own grave, and then has him beheaded and just sort of kicks the body into the grave and buries him. So this is the main story of Dracula's reign. The big event comes at the very end because it's a very exciting and dramatic end to his second time in charge of Romania, of Wallachia. And this is going to be when he starts an apparently unmotivated war against the Ottoman Empire. The whole point of Wallachia, of the Wallachian state, is that it's trying to balance these two powers against each other. For whatever reason, Vlad decides to throw all in with Hungary, rely on Matthias Corvinus to help him, and he's going to have the Turkish envoys executed and start a war against the Ottoman Empire. So the story goes, this is a famous Romanian painting by an artist whose name is eluding me. I thought I wrote it down. He's a Romanist artist from the 19th century. And the story goes that the Turks refused to remove their turbans, as was customary. They're supposed to keep their heads covered. Dracula took offense at this. When they said it was their custom to keep them on, he said, "Well, I believe that is a good custom. I will help to reinforce it by nailing the turbans to their head with giant spikes." So he kills the envoys, and then he's going to lead a raid across the Danube into what is now Bulgaria, and absolutely ravage the whole region. And for once, we have in his own words, an account of his activities and behavior. According to his own account, "I have killed men and women, old and young. We killed 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians in all, without counting those burned alive in their houses or whose heads were not brought before our officers. The people, men, women, children, and babies, were all killed, and in these places nothing remained. And in the above are included only those whose heads or signs were brought before our officials, who were everywhere, but those who were not presented to them or who were burned in their homes could not be counted because there were so many." So to just sort of prove that he was not lying about this, he had a whole bunch of bags of severed ears sent to Matthias Corvinus in Budapest, just to let him know that he meant what he said. All of these peoples are civilians, of course. They're all going to be civilian population. There weren't much in the way of, there's about 1,000 Turkish soldiers in this list here. Most of these guys would have been Orthodox Christians because the Turks had only just taken over the place. And the idea was to devastate the whole region, to make it impossible or very difficult for the Turks to cross over the Danube, which is a very big river, and attack Dracula in Wallachia. But, of course, by declaring war on them in this dramatic a fashion, he also knew that it was inevitable this would happen. He was relying on Matthias Corvinus to come to his aid, just like his father would have, the great crusader. In the most dramatic moment of his reign, Mehmet crosses over the Danube, he invades Wallachia. His army outnumbers Dracula by something like 10 to 1. He wipes everything out before him, devastates the whole region, and Dracula knows that his only real chance is a surprise attack. So in the middle of the night, he disguises himself as a Turk. Remember that Dracula speaks perfect Turkish because he was raised in the royal court. And he sneaks into the camp of Mehmet and leads an attack that burns as much of the camp as he can get down, tries to take Mehmet and kill him, but ends up mistaking Mehmet's tent in the darkness, only killing one of his top guys, and then being forced to leave. So his great attack is very famous and well remembered in Romania. This is the great heroic moment of the invasion. And the Romanian story, the Romanian legends about this, are that Mehmet was really shocked by this whole thing. He was quite frightened by it, but he continued his march until he hit the city of Targovishta, when he came across what the Greek sources describe as a forest of the impaled. So according to the Greek historian Chalcoconides, there was a whole forest of impaled people that stretched for 2.5 miles long, 1 mile wide, just outside the capital, just beyond the capital of Targovishta, which include 20,000 people on spikes, And on the highest spikes above all of them were the ambassadors and Turkish officials that Vlad had seized and captured from the Turks. This is the official Romanian story, is that Mehmet was so shocked and surprised by this, he turned around, but Vlad's brother remained behind, convinced the boyars that Vlad was a menace. He got their estates destroyed. He needed to be deposed. They deposed Vlad, and Vlad flees out of the country. That doesn't sound very plausible to me, as far as that goes. If Vlad had won his war against the greatest conqueror in the world, he would presumably have stayed on his throne pretty much untouchable. Instead, what looks like it happened is Mehmet succeeded. He drove Vlad out of his home. Dracula's brother Radu, the brother that went into captivity with him in Mehmet's court, he was brought in as a young age. He ended up becoming Mehmet's lover, and he was a loyal ally to Mehmet. So Mehmet liked the idea of having him on the throne, put him on the throne. Radu is going to last for 12 years, twice as long as Vlad does, in a period of relative peace for all the population of Wallachia amidst all of these years of war. So, whatever happened, Vlad is driven out of Targovishta. He is forced to flee north into the Carpathian Mountains, the northern part of his realm, near the border of Transylvania. And he waits in these mountains for support from Matthias Corvinus, who is the guy who he sent that letter to, boasting about all of the civilians that he had just had butchered. So he waits around, he wanders around this region, which is very difficult to enter, very, very difficult for an army to pass through, until eventually Matthias arrives with his army. Vlad goes off to meet Matthias, and Matthias immediately has him arrested, locked up, and thrown in chains. And it happens somewhere near here. This is a place called Bran Castle, near Bran Pass. And it seems likely this was a fortress of the kings of Hungary, so this was Matthias's castle. It seems likely that Dracula was held prisoner here for at least a few days while he met up with Matthias, and Matthias explained to him what was up. But if you go to Romania today, this is billed as Castle Dracula. This is billed as Dracula's fortress where he lived, for no better reason that I can understand than the fact that it looks pretty, and also Bran sounds like Bram, as in Bram Stoker. Get it? So this is roughly where Stoker described his castle as being anywhere near the Bran Pass. So they really sort of play up this Dracula connection, even though the actual connection is quite minimal. Beautiful place, though. It's been restored in the 19th century in a sort of pseudo-medieval setting. And they've got this beautiful sort of sculpture mannequin of Dracula dressed up in a complete version of his court garb, which I think is pretty impressive. The whole thing is, of course, naturally quite tasteful and not at all exploitative or in any way farcical. So, after Bran Castle, Vlad is hauled back to the capital of Transylvania, Alba Iulia, where he's going to be imprisoned near where Hunyadi himself is buried, and then he is going to be taken still further to the city of Budapest, the capital of the Hungarian Empire, and then he's going to be locked in prison and sort of left to wait while Matthias decides what to do with him. So, Budapest and Hungary are not immune to Dracula fever either. If you ever visit Budapest, you can visit this underground cavern, this underground prison, which claims to be where Dracula was held while he was in Budapest. And just like all these other places, it too is entirely unexploitative and not at all tacky or tasteless or in any way trying to just sort of rip people off. In reality, Dracula seems to have been imprisoned here in a palace favored by Matthias Corvinus, not too far outside of Budapest, way up in the mountains where it was going to be impossible for him to escape. And at Visegrad, he is going to live the next 13 years of his life as a prisoner. So he's going to be a prisoner here for twice as long as he ruled over Wallachia. And it is here that the legends and stories start to pop up. So I spoke about his enemies writing the story of Dracula, and the whole reason for these wood carvings and these stories to be developed is because Matthias Corvinus, this great Catholic king of Hungary, has to explain to the Christian world why he went to the rescue of a great crusader, a great enemy of the Turks, and then took him prisoner and brought him back in chains. It seems that Matthias just didn't want a war with Turkey at this moment because he wanted to have a war with the Holy Roman Empire to ensure that he had a firm control over the Hungarian crown. But you can't say that to the Christian world. He tries to fake some documents where Dracula offers to sell out Hungary in exchange for pardon for his crimes, but nobody believes that because, you know, somebody who's just killed, by his own admission, 23,000 Turkish subjects is not likely to just flip around and betray the King of Hungary. This is a guy who is pretty committed to the cause of crusade. So Matthias's explanation for why he took Dracula prisoner is that this man is a monster. He is a brute. He is a fiend, a tyrant, the worst of the worst. He is going to publicize all of these stories of his brutality, of his ruthlessness, of his cruelty. And this is why Dracula has the reputation that he does. Don't want to make out that he was a nice guy, but it seems that a lot of it's true that a lot of the work that was written about him is propaganda designed to blacken his name as much as possible to justify the unjustifiable in the eyes of Christian Europe, why a great crusader was taken prisoner, brought back to Hungary instead of helped in his wars against the Turks. So Dracula is going to be a prisoner, and while he's a prisoner, he's not going to be isolated from everybody. He's going to be presented at court occasions. He's going to be there at Matthias's coronation. And you can see Dracula in some of these paintings that are made in the court at Budapest at this time. So here's Dracula as Pontius Pilate, as Jesus is being crucified. Here he is again, immediately recognizable, especially with his distinctive headgear, watching St. Peter be crucified. And these are, sorry, St. Andrew. And these are examples of Dracula. He wanders around. It's a reasonably nice house arrest, but he's not going to be allowed to escape. He's going to be remaining under the Hungarian king's control. Now, while he is there, he's also going to be the subject of these other stories. These stories are going to be written by the Russians, and to the Russians, Vlad is going to be a great hero. So they take the German stories of his cruelty and malice and random violence, and they say, yes, he did all of these things, but he did it because he was trying to be just. The most important thing for a ruler is to be as cruel as possible in a just way, or to install justice and order through cruelty. That's the only way to do it. It's about the most Russian-sounding thing that I can imagine. And they don't deny any of his cruelty. They embrace it and say that this is what a king needs to do. This is going to be very popular under Ivan the Terrible, who comes right after this. It serves as sort of an example to him. But even in the Russian stories, as they try to make Vlad's brutality make sense, they are still going to acknowledge that there is some sort of perverse obsession in all of this. While he is held prisoner in Visegrad, Russian accounts tell the story that he is still capturing or buying small animals, skinning them alive, or impaling them on spikes and leaving them outside the window. There is some sort of obsession that he has with impalement, with killing things that just can't go away just because he is locked up in prison. So Vlad is locked up for 13 years, while the King of Hungary is completely fine with his brother Radu on the throne. There's no more wars with the Ottomans. The Ottomans have decided they want nothing to do with Wallachia for the moment. It's proving to be too much trouble. So everything is peaceful and quiet and calm, until eventually, as always happens, Matthias decides he's no longer happy with the current king of Wallachia. He funds a new candidate for the throne, drives Dracula's brother off the throne, and then has his own candidate put on the throne. This candidate proves even more unacceptable because he openly goes over to the Ottomans. So with no one else really to turn to, Matthias decides, you know what? He's got this Prince of Wallachia already on hand. Why not rejuvenate Dracula, put him back on the throne as a loyal subject of the Hungarian Empire? And as long as Dracula converts to Catholicism, marries one of Matthias's daughters, he is going to be given the throne of Wallachia, and he's going to be allowed to become prince again and assume control for a second time. So he's set up on an estate in Pest, in the lower part of Budapest, not too far, ironically, from a statue of Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi is from Budapest, so he is born near where Dracula lived most of his life. And here, once again, we get examples of Dracula's kind of weird sense of justice. So while he's living in his own estate, a burglar breaks into his home, sneaks into his home while he's running from the police. The police pursue him, break into Dracula's home to catch the burglar. Dracula comes upon them, takes the police captain and just cuts his head off, and the rest of the police go running back to King Matthias. Matthias summons Dracula before him and says, "What the hell was that? Why did you kill my police officer?" And Dracula said that, well, one does not come into a prince's home unannounced. If he had asked me for permission to enter, I would have given him the criminal, or I would have punished him myself. Because he broke into my home unannounced, I executed him as is my right as a prince. And Matthias just kind of let it go at that. What are you really supposed to do? Put Dracula in charge of his armies leading the Crusades against the Turks, and sent Dracula back into Wallachia to retake the throne for what is now the third time. And here is where Dracula's story comes to an end, at this little island of Snagov, not too far north of Bucharest. So Dracula is given an army, or given the support of a Hungarian and Moldavian army, which marches into Wallachia, puts him on the throne, and then withdraws back to their own territory. And as soon as they are gone, as soon as the army has left, the Turks send their own army in with their own candidate. Vlad is killed in battle, his head is cut off, sent to the Sultan in Constantinople, and Vlad himself is going to be left behind and buried, supposedly here at Snagov, where there is a whole, this is the monastery, where there's a whole sort of plaque to him, a whole medal of him, sort of like an icon, like a religious icon, like a saint, in front of his tomb where he's buried. So it's this place there, right at the foot of the altar. It's worth noting that this is not in any way confirmed, no matter what the tour guides will tell you. They did dig this grave up. They did discover a body, but it had a head, which is a little bit difficult to explain if it was Dracula. One of the books that I've read explains this away by saying that when they say beheaded, they don't mean they literally cut the head off. The traditional Turkish way of doing it is to skin the head, pull the skin off, stuff it with straw. It's preserved better that way, and you don't have to stick your fingers in the mouth, which is a violation of all sorts of Islamic cultural taboos to interfere with bodies that way. And so this may well have been Dracula. They dug up the body, they took the clothing and jewelry out, but this was in 1937, right before World War II, and over the course of the war, when all of these remains are evacuated from Bucharest, they go missing and nobody knows where they are. If we had them today, we could probably do DNA testing. Dracula does have relatives down the line. The Dracula family continues well past him. But as it is, it's anybody's guess whether this is actually him. But either way, Dracula's story has come to an end in 1476, and that is the end of of the historical figure of Dracula. So there you go. Hopefully that was, I know that was a lot. I think I went a little bit over on time. But yeah, I hope that was interesting. Does anyone have any?
So
Yes.
how does the fictional depiction of the, the drinking the blood from the neck and the fangs and everything else relate to what the actual stuff is?
It doesn't. So Bram Stoker just took the name Dracula because he thought it sounded cool. His original idea was he was going to call him Nosferatu, Count Vampire was what it was, Count Vampire. But he decided that name was a little bit meh. And when he came across the name Dracula, we're not sure which book, but he came across the name Dracula, he said, that sounds like a cool name, I'll take that and make him a count. Like I said, count is a demotion. He was actually the equivalent of a duke, so he would have been a very important figure in his part of the world in his day. Vampires, though, are very much Romanian. The myths and legends that Bram Stoker repeats, they're pretty accurate to the Romanian legends. They still believe in vampires. They have official people whose task is to drive vampires away through parades displaying cloth, the cross and garlic, particularly in these rural villages. And whenever the idea of vampires for them is when somebody is buried, they just come back to life. If the person's soul is unrestful, it'll come up and suck the blood and then come back. So if they suspect somebody of being a vampire, they'll dig up the body, or they always used to dig up the body. If the body hasn't decomposed properly, must be a vampire, so then they cut its head off, stuff it with garlic. The stake to the heart isn't an integral element of it, but it's one of the things that they say. Garlic is very strongly associated with it, so is beheading. So if Dracula was a vampire, beheading should have done it. It should have done the trick. Oh, do I have a question from the chat? Let's see. Looks good. No, I don't think that's a question. Okay, if anybody has any questions on online, they're more than welcome to ask them. Anyone else have any questions?
Well,
Excellent, thank you.
That I live now and not in the,
Huh?
under the reign of Vlad.
He was an interesting guy. I really, like for me the most interesting thing is what is true and what is not, because it's very, very hard to say what is and is not true about him. So my mom brought a whole bunch, she brought a whole bunch of my reading material here on the guy. And there's all sorts of different accounts of him. Like this one's the most common one in English. It dives into the mythic stuff, and it sort of takes a lot of the stories very, very seriously. More seriously, I think, in many cases than it deserves. You get other books where it's much more, like this one's based entirely on non-German or Russian sources. It's only based on official historical accounts. All the legendary material is removed. And it turns out you can still say quite a bit about Vlad's life from all that, including the interesting fact that when he came to the throne, the boyars had to sort of approve official documents that are written. And the list of boyars, 3 years into his reign, all but 3 of them have been completely changed. So the rest are either gone or dead. And after his reign, every single one of the boyars is different. So whatever else he had a great deal of loyalty from among the boyars that he relied on to keep him on the throne, because his successor, his brother, had to get rid of all of them and replace them with an entirely new batch of boyars. So make of that what you will. Did he have them all killed? Everyone who wasn't loyal to him? Did he have some qualities that the Romanians remember him as having, as being this great ruler? I don't know. It's sort of a mysterious sort of thing. What got me into Dracula? I'm not sure really. I always find, oops, did that just die off? Oh, what happened? It just, oh, did we run out of time?
Oh,
It's a timed event. Oh, shoot.
Oh.
Oh, no.
Careful, don't back up too far.
Yeah. Well, oh shoot, I'll answer the question anyway. Oh, no, there it goes. It's back again. I don't know what happened. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I don't know. I came across the Florescu McNally book years and years and years ago, and I thought it was a very interesting book. I found it kind of fascinating because I don't know that much about Eastern Europe. I've tried to find more about Romanian history, but it's very, very hard to find Romanian history books in the library in English. There's just not very much written, particularly about medieval Romanian history. Outside of Dracula, that's all you've got. I'd love to read some more books about the other princes of the era. Stephen the Great in Moldavia is one of the big national heroes of Romania. He was one of Vlad's rivals. And he would be well worth a biography, but I haven't seen it in English, so I'm just going to have to sort of do with Dracula. But he is a interesting enough guy, I think, for a lot of reasons. He's probably one of the most interesting of all the different rulers of Galicia, all the different Romanian kings, just because of how much happened during his relatively short life.
how old
yeah.
was he when he died?
I say very relatively short. He's about 47. So he only reigned for about 6 years as voivoda. But he did a lot during that time. He had an eventful rule. And yeah, very eventful rule. And no matter which of the stories you believe, it's quite clear that he left a mark. That's the right way of putting it. Not a nice guy. In fairness to him, there were no nice guys. In that part of the world, at that point in time, the only thing that brought victory and success was to be as ruthless and cruel as humanly possible. So anyone with half a brain who wanted to survive had to be ruthless and vindictive in order to survive. I sort of think back on that. I think there's two possible ways of looking at it based on that. First of those is that it explains a lot about why he was the way he was, because everybody was doing it. And the second is that if everybody is an absolutely ruthless monster, it takes quite a lot to stand out from the crowd. And it seems that Vlad did stand out from the crowd for his sort of wanton cruelty. But there you go.
You went there on purpose for a vacation? And you
Well,
learned this?
no, I knew it before I went, so I looked. I knew where I wanted to go. I went to a bunch of different places. I went to the Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia on one trip. So it was mainly looking at old Roman sites. But while I was in Romania, I did see their Roman sites, but I also got to see their Dracula stuff, because I do find him very interesting. And the Saxon cities are some of the most beautiful places in all of Romania, so they are well worth seeing. My only disappointment was I didn't get to go up to see Poinari Castle, because Poinari Castle, as you can tell, is a pretty amazing place. But maybe I'll get to go back and it'll be open. Maybe I'll get to go the entire Transfiguration and go up and over the Carpathian Mountains. It's got all these hairpin turns. It's a pretty cool road. But that's for a later day if I ever go back there. I would have been so disappointed if I'd gotten to Poinari and I'd just had to sit there at the bottom and look up at it. But I mean, you go up. You go up, you look out from Poinari, and you can see they've got an amazing view of all of the area around. Like it's really impressive how much of the Fagarash you can actually see from. Oh shoot! Wow. well, whatever, I'll let it play out because it's pretty cool anyway. But yeah, it's amazing how much you can see from the top up there. It's pretty cool. A very effective place to fortify a castle, even if Vlad doesn't seem to have used it very much, because he ended up going in the opposite direction, fleeing, trying to get the support of Matthias Corvinus.
But he never stayed there.
Huh?
He never stayed there.
Oh no, he stayed there, but the idea of Poinari is that it's this isolated, there's nothing to the north of it except the Carpathians, nobody lives up there. So it's near Curtia de Argesh, the old capital of Wallachia. So I think the idea was this is an impossible place to besiege. If the king gets in trouble, if his lands get conquered by an enemy, he can retreat to his castle here and nobody is going to be able to drive him out. They can starve him out if that's what happens, but outside of that, he's pretty much safe. And he did not end up using it for that purpose, at least not as far as we can tell. If he did use it for that purpose, he ended up leaving and headed east to try and meet up with the King of Hungary. He might have done, you never know. But yeah, you can see the Transfiguration all the way over here. Oh, there's a car actually, a couple cars, I didn't notice that, driving along it. And it goes all the way up the side of the cliffs there, up, and the dam is somewhere up near there. So yeah, it's a pretty cool place. If I'd been just a few minutes earlier, it would have been wreathed in fog, which was really cool, but just barely missed it. But you know, it's morning fog, so.
Thank you, it's very good.
Okay.